The story begins in a far corner of the galaxy, in a region known to very few species, a place that was quiet, calm, and seemingly untouched by the chaos that often accompanied the expansion of civilizations into space. Here lived the Lyrians, a species of intelligent beings, whose society had developed over thousands of years in harmony with their lush and vibrant home planet. Their world was unique, filled with endless oceans, sprawling forests, and mountains that reached into skies painted with two suns. Unlike many other civilizations that had focused on conquest or military strength, the Lyrians had chosen a path of peace, scientific exploration, and cultural growth. They were deeply connected to their planet, respecting every living creature and every natural process. This connection was reflected not only in their architecture, which blended seamlessly with the environment, but also in their technology, which was designed to enhance life rather than dominate it. Life for the Lyrians had been relatively predictable for centuries. They had developed advanced technologies, but these were mostly used to improve health, communication, and understanding of the natural world around them. They had magnificent cities that floated above the water in harmony with the tides, energy systems that drew power without harming the environment, and vehicles that glided silently through the skies without leaving pollution or noise. Their society valued knowledge, wisdom, and the well-being of all beings. Leaders were chosen based on merit, intelligence, and the ability to guide with empathy. Education was the most respected profession, and the pursuit of understanding the universe was at the heart of their culture. Despite their advanced knowledge, the Lyrians had never faced real danger from outside their planet. The galaxy around them was vast, filled with other civilizations, some of which were far more aggressive or technologically dominant, but the Lyrians had little contact with these civilizations, mostly because they had deliberately avoided entangling themselves in interstellar politics or conflicts. They lived in what they considered a bubble of safety, protected by their remoteness and their own careful observation of space. However, this isolation also meant that they lacked experience in dealing with sudden catastrophic threats. They had theories about natural cosmic events, but nothing in their history had prepared them for the real, unpredictable dangers that could arise from beyond their world. At the same time, humanity, a species that had once been confined to a small, pale blue planet in a different corner of the galaxy, had grown rapidly, both technologically and socially. Humans had not always been peaceful or wise. Their early history on Earth had been filled with conflict, mistakes, and near self-destruction. But over centuries, humans had learned to expand beyond their home planet and had begun colonizing nearby systems. This expansion was guided by a mix of curiosity, survival instinct, and a desire to explore the unknown. Unlike the Lyrians, humans were accustomed to challenges, risks, and sudden emergencies. They had faced crises that threatened entire planets, and they had developed strategies, fleets, and technologies to respond quickly. When lives were at stake, the human fleet had become a symbol of resilience and decisiveness. It was not only a military force but also a humanitarian presence, often dispatched to assist when other civilizations were in danger, whether from natural disasters, internal conflicts, or sudden cosmic threats. Humanity's philosophy was that survival was not just about protecting oneself but also about extending help when possible. This approach had earned humans a reputation across certain parts of the galaxy as both unpredictable and reliable. Unpredictable because of their boldness and willingness to act where others hesitated, and reliable because once they committed to a mission, they followed it through with determination. The turning point of this part of the story came with an unusual and desperate signal reaching human senses. Far across the stars, a call for help arrived, originating from the Lyrians' planet. It was unlike any routine communication. The signal carried an unmistakable urgency, conveying fear, distress, and a plea for assistance. The Lyrians, who had never requested help from outsiders before, had recognized the severity of the threat they faced. They were facing something that their knowledge, technology, and society could not handle alone. The human fleet, receiving this call, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The decision was not a matter of politics, trade, or gain. It was a decision rooted in the principles humanity had embraced over centuries of exploration, to respond to those in peril when they had the means to do so. The Lyrians' plea painted a picture of impending disaster. The humans quickly realized that the planet they were looking at was not just in trouble, but in a situation where failure to act could result in the complete destruction of a civilization. Humans had long studied cosmic anomalies, radiation storms, and environmental catastrophes. But what the Lyrians faced was different. The signal indicated that natural forces, amplified perhaps by rare cosmic conditions, were threatening the very foundations of life on the planet. Unlike conventional wars or predictable disasters, this threat was chaotic and required immediate attention, precise calculation, and bold action. Meanwhile, the Lyrians themselves were depicted as a civilization caught in a moment of fear and uncertainty. They were intelligent, capable, and wise, yet they were now confronted by something beyond their experience. Their leaders, scientists, and citizens had been working tirelessly to find a solution, but every measure they attempted seemed insufficient. This scenario added layers of tension and emotion to the narrative. Humans, though distant, were now the potential lifeline, the only species equipped with both the resources and the willingness to step into the unknown and act decisively. The arrival of this signal also highlighted the contrast between the two civilizations. The Lyrians represented a species rooted in harmony, careful planning, and patience, while humanity represented action, adaptability, and courage under uncertainty. This contrast set the stage for a story not just about saving a planet, but about the meeting of two civilizations whose strengths and experiences complemented each other. Humanity's capacity to respond quickly, coupled with the Lyrians' deep knowledge of their environment, hinted at the collaborative potential that would define the story's progression. Part of the intrigue of this introduction lies in the emotional and philosophical undertones. Humans were far from perfect, they had made mistakes and had a history of conflicts, but their willingness to act, their ethical sense, and their technological preparedness made them capable of making a real difference. For the Lyrians, this crisis forced a shift in perspective. They had to trust beings they barely knew, relying on the judgment and goodwill of humans to help preserve everything they held dear. The stage was set for an extraordinary intersection of fate, courage, and mutual reliance. The narrative also emphasized the scale and beauty of the Lyrians' world, making the threat feel real and urgent. Readers or listeners could imagine a planet with vast oceans reflecting twin suns, forests teeming with life, and cities that blended with nature seamlessly. By portraying what was at stake, the loss of an entire civilization's culture, knowledge, and way of life, the story heightened the tension and made the eventual human intervention feel monumental. Ultimately, this part of the story serves as the foundation, introducing the audience to the main players, their values, and the crisis that sets everything in motion. It establishes the Lyrians as a civilization worth saving, humanity as a capable and morally driven force, and the cosmic challenge as a threat that requires extraordinary courage and ingenuity. By the end of this phase, the reader or listener is fully aware of the stakes, emotionally invested in the characters, and eagerly anticipating the actions that humanity will take to answer the Lyrians' desperate call for help. This initial phase is crucial not only for world building but also for setting up the dramatic tension that will carry up through the rest of the story. It lays the groundwork for understanding why humans respond, why the Lyrians cannot solve the problem alone, and how the collaboration between the two species will become the central focus of the narrative. The combination of cosmic scale, rich description, and emotional stakes ensures that Part 1 is engaging, vivid, and provides a solid launch point for the adventure, challenges, and heroism that are about to unfold by the time Part 1 concludes. The scene is fully set, humans have received the call, the Lyrians' planet is in peril, and both civilizations are poised on the brink of a life-changing interaction. Readers are left with a sense of anticipation and hope, knowing that extraordinary action is coming and that the story is about to move from the calm, detailed introduction into the chaos and urgency of rising challenges. The moment the human fleet received the Lyrians' distress signal, the situation immediately became a matter of extreme urgency. The message had conveyed fear, confusion, and desperation, leaving no doubt that the Lyrians were facing a disaster they could not handle on their own. For the humans, it was clear that immediate action was necessary, but what exactly they were walking into was far from certain. The signal described a rapidly worsening situation, cosmic anomalies, unpredictable storms, and environmental instability, but lacked the specifics that would make planning easy. The human commanders understood that this mission would not be like any other. It would require courage, careful coordination, and the ability to adapt in real time to unknown dangers. Preparing the fleet was no simple task. Humans were skilled at responding to crises, but this challenge was extraordinary. The fleet had to be mobilized from multiple star systems, with ships traveling hundreds of light years to reach the Lyrian sector. Every ship carried specialized equipment, atmospheric stabilizers, evacuation shuttles, energy shields, medical supplies, and teams of engineers trained for extreme situations. Crew members had to be briefed on a disaster scenario that was entirely unprecedented. They had to understand that their mission was not simply to observe or support, it was to intervene directly in an alien world's survival. Many of the human personnel had trained for dangerous situations, but this was different. They were venturing into the unknown, into the midst of a natural phenomenon that could destroy entire cities in moments at the same time. The Lyrians themselves were struggling to cope with the growing threat. Their scientists had been monitoring subtle changes in their atmosphere and magnetic fields for months, initially hoping that the strange energy patterns they observed were temporary, but the patterns grew more violent, and natural disasters unlike anything recorded in their history began to occur with increasing frequency. Massive storms tore through forests, tidal waves swept across coastal cities, and tremors shattered structures that had stood for centuries. The Lyrians realized that they needed help, but reaching other civilizations was a challenge. Their planet's remote location and their minimal interaction with interstellar neighbors meant that help could not arrive instantly. The distress signal was the result of careful consideration. The Lyrians knew they had no other choice but to appeal to those far beyond their sector, hoping that someone would act quickly enough to save their world. Humans, despite their distance and lack of prior relations with the Lyrians, immediately recognized the moral and practical imperative to respond. Commanders convened emergency meetings, reviewing the data transmitted in the Lyrian signal. It became evident that the situation involved both natural and unpredictable cosmic event storms fueled by unusual energy surges, shifts in atmospheric composition, and magnetic anomalies that could wreak havoc on both land and sea. The human fleet had to arrive prepared for multiple contingencies, stabilizing cities, protecting populations, and ensuring the safety of the fleet itself while operating in a dangerously volatile environment. As the fleet approached the Lyrian sector, the human crews began to face the first signs of the true scale of the disaster. Observations from long-range scanners revealed massive storms forming across the planet's oceans and skies. Waves taller than any human had ever seen crashed violently against the shores, and lightning storms danced across the skies with a terrifying intensity. Cities that had once floated serenely above the water were now threatened by destructive winds and tidal surges. The Lyrians were still struggling to maintain control, but it was clear that their technology, while advanced in many ways, was not sufficient to counteract the immense power of the cosmic forces. Now converging on their planet, the human fleet had to make a series of critical decisions. They could not intervene directly until they fully understood the environment, but waiting too long risked the complete destruction of the Lyrians' civilization. To gather information, reconnaissance teams were deployed, using drones and advanced sensors to map the planet's changing conditions in real time. These teams encountered immediate danger. Energy surges disrupted communications, powerful windstorms threatened to destroy the drones, and atmospheric instability made navigation hazardous. Every step revealed new challenges, forcing humans to adjust their plans and adapt to conditions that were unlike anything they had encountered before. Meanwhile, on the planet itself, the Lyrians faced the rising challenge with determination and fear. Leaders coordinated evacuation plans for the most vulnerable populations, while engineers tried to strengthen structures and redirect natural energy flows. But every effort was met with unpredictable resistance from the environment. A forest fire ignited by lightning would spread faster than anticipated, a tidal wave would strike areas thought to be safe, and magnetic anomalies would interfere with the Lyrians' energy grids. The humans watching from orbit realized that time was running out. The Lyrians' defenses could not hold for much longer without external intervention. As the humans observed, they began to formulate potential solutions. They realized that simple evacuation would not be enough. While moving populations to safety could save lives in the short term, the planet itself needed stabilization to prevent long-term destruction. That meant deploying orbital energy shields, stabilizing atmospheric currents, and supporting the Lyrians in reinforcing their critical infrastructure. It was a plan that required precision, speed, and cooperation between two very different civilizations. For humans, it was a test of ingenuity and courage. For the Lyrians, it was an exercise in trust, relying on beings they barely knew to intervene in their most desperate hour. The psychological impact on both sides was immense. Human crews faced the fear of the unknown, the possibility that their interventions could fail catastrophically, or that the cosmic storms could destroy the fleet itself. They had trained for dangerous missions, but the scale of this disaster was unprecedented. Lyrians, for their part, had to confront the terrifying possibility that their entire civilization could be wiped out. Despite centuries of careful planning and peaceful existence, children and families were evacuated, elders were guided to safety zones, and communities were forced to work together under conditions of extreme stress. The sense of urgency permeated every action, every decision, and every moment of communication. The human commanders also recognized that the stakes extended beyond immediate survival. The Lyrians' civilization represented knowledge, culture, and experience accumulated over millennia. Losing them would mean the disappearance of unique scientific advancements, art, philosophy, and wisdom elements that humanity, despite its own history of progress, could only admire and respect. This awareness added another layer of motivation. The mission was not simply about responding to a call for help, it was about preserving a civilization that had the potential to contribute to the broader understanding of life in the galaxy. Throughout this rising challenge phase, logistical difficulties were constant. Supply chains had to be maintained over interstellar distances. The fleet's energy shields and stabilization equipment had to be calibrated for conditions never before encountered, and medical teams had to prepare for injuries that could result from extreme environmental hazards. Even the seemingly simple task of communication was fraught with danger. The storms interfered with signals, and human technicians had to develop rapid solutions to maintain contact both among ships and with Lyrians on the ground. Every decision carried weight, every action had consequences, and every second counted as the crisis intensified. Despite the overwhelming odds, humans demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and flexibility. They adapted their strategies based on real-time data, improvised solutions for unexpected problems, and worked tirelessly to coordinate with the Lyrians. Engineers developed new methods to counteract the destabilizing storms. Pilots navigated dangerous conditions to deliver aid, and planners continuously revised evacuation routes and support operations. The human response, though stressful and complex, showed a combination of bravery, intellect, and moral commitment that became the backbone of the mission's eventual success. By the end of this phase, the full magnitude of the challenge was clear. The Lyrians were still under threat. Their cities and communities teetered on the edge of destruction, and the human fleet had to operate with extraordinary precision to prevent catastrophe. The situation demanded not only advanced technology and strategic thinking but also emotional resilience and collaboration. Both civilizations were pushed to their limits, facing a crisis that tested every skill, every resource, and every ounce of courage available. In conclusion, this part of the story captures the tension, urgency, and complexity of the rising challenge. The humans are mobilized and responding, the Lyrians are struggling to survive, and the cosmic forces present unpredictable and overwhelming threats. Every decision, every action, and every moment carries profound consequences. The narrative emphasizes the courage, intelligence, and adaptability required to face such a challenge, while also highlighting the emotional stakes and the extraordinary responsibility that comes with trying to save an entire civilization. By the end of this phase, readers or listeners are fully immersed in the crisis, understanding both the danger and the heroism that will define the next stages of the story. As the human fleet drew closer to the Lyrians' planet, the situation escalated far beyond what anyone had anticipated. From a distance, the planet had already begun to show signs of extreme instability. But now that the humans were in orbit, the full scale of the disaster became shockingly clear. The storms, which had previously appeared as massive, chaotic patterns on sensors, now manifested as colossal spirals of energy. Lightning flashing across the skies with terrifying intensity, oceans swelling into towering walls of water, and winds that could easily tear through structures designed to withstand centuries of natural conditions. Cities that had floated gracefully above the water were buffeted by currents and waves, some tilting dangerously while others were inundated by surging tides. The Lyrians, despite their advanced knowledge and careful planning, were struggling to maintain even a semblance of control over the rapidly deteriorating environment. The humans quickly realized that standard approaches to disaster relief would not work in this scenario. Evacuation alone was insufficient because the storms were unpredictable and massive enough to render conventional transport unsafe. Even orbital drops of supplies or rescue pods required precise timing, as strong energy surges and violent winds threatened to destroy equipment before it could reach the ground. Additionally, communication with the Lyrians on the surface was intermittent. The planet's electromagnetic disturbances interfered with transmissions, leaving human commanders uncertain about the exact conditions and locations most in need of assistance. Every attempt to gather real-time data was met with interference from natural phenomena far stronger than anything humans had ever experienced. The human fleet had to face not just the natural challenges but the ethical and tactical complexity of their mission. Each decision carried life or death consequences for thousands, perhaps millions of lives. On board the command ships, engineers and strategists worked feverishly to adjust their plans based on incomplete information. They calculated trajectories for rescue pods, monitored the stability of energy shields, and prepared backup strategies for nearly every conceivable failure. Even a minor miscalculation could result in the loss of entire cities or the destruction of critical human equipment. The stress was immense, and yet the crew knew that hesitation was more dangerous than action. They had to operate under conditions where mistakes could be catastrophic, trusting their training, intelligence, and each other to navigate the escalating chaos. The critical moment arrived when a particularly massive storm formed, directly above one of the Lyrians' largest cities. The storm was unlike anything recorded before, an immense swirling vortex of wind, rain, and energy, with electrical discharges tearing through the atmosphere in jagged, unpredictable patterns. The city below was home to tens of thousands of Lyrians, including vulnerable populations such as children, the elderly, and those with medical conditions. Observing the storm from orbit, human commanders understood immediately that time was running out. If the storm hit full force, the city could be destroyed entirely, and the loss of life would be catastrophic. In response, humans devised a daring and unprecedented plan. Using the fleet's advanced technology, they intended to deploy a combination of orbital energy shields, atmospheric stabilizers, and gravitational anchors. The energy shields were designed to absorb and redirect the storm's energy, reducing its impact on the city below. Atmospheric stabilizers would help control wind patterns and reduce turbulence, while gravitational anchors would prevent the city from being lifted or displaced by the violent forces of the storm. The plan was risky because each device had to function perfectly, and deployment required precise timing and coordination across multiple ships and teams. Any failure in execution could result in total disaster, but doing nothing guaranteed destruction. While humans prepared, the Lyrians on the ground struggled to protect their communities. They reinforced buildings, evacuated those who could be moved, and tried to coordinate with human teams using sporadic transmissions. The Lyrians were aware that humans were their only hope, yet the storm's unpredictability made collaboration difficult. There were moments when the Lyrians feared that the humans might not be able to reach them in time, and moments when humans doubted whether their interventions could succeed. The tension was immense on both sides, creating a narrative of suspense, courage, and urgent action. Execution of the plan began with reconnaissance drones, sent ahead to identify the most dangerous zones and test the initial effectiveness of the shields. The drones faced immediate hazards. Violent winds tore some apart, electrical surges disabled others, and unexpected debris fields created deadly obstacles. Human engineers had to adapt quickly, recalibrating sensors and adjusting shield frequencies in real time. The fleet operated almost like a living organism, each ship and crew member playing a role in a complex dance of strategy, science, and courage. Observing from orbit, humans could see the city below trembling under the storm, but their determination never wavered. They understood that failure was not an option. The most dramatic moment occurred when the first major storm surge struck. A wall of water, higher than any building, advanced toward the city at alarming speed. Energy shields deployed just in time, absorbing a significant portion of the impact, while atmospheric stabilizers began to redirect wind currents. Lyrians on the ground watched in awe and relief as the previously unstoppable force began to lose its destructive intensity. Still, the danger was far from over. The storm was chaotic, shifting unpredictably, and human crews had to continuously adjust shield placements and power outputs. Engineers worked under immense pressure, their hands moving with precision while their minds calculated probabilities and risks faster than most could imagine. As the operation continued, additional storms formed across the planet, each presenting unique challenges. Some storms carried intense electrical activity, threatening both humans and Lyrians with fire and lightning strikes. Others were high-energy wind systems capable of tearing apart structures or flipping vehicles. Humans coordinated multiple simultaneous interventions, splitting teams to address each threat while maintaining overall stability. Lyrians, seeing the humans' relentless effort, gained renewed hope and courage. Children clung to their families, elders helped guide evacuations, and scientists worked alongside humans to maximize the efficiency of every intervention. What had begun as desperation gradually transformed into collaboration, with both civilizations acting as one unified force against an overwhelming natural threat. During this critical moment, human pilots performed feats that tested the limits of skill and bravery. Flying close to the surface, they deployed stabilization equipment while navigating violent turbulence and energy surges. Each maneuver required split-second decisions, precise calculations, and nerves of steel. Engineers on board monitored real-time data, adjusting shield strength and atmospheric interventions to respond to changing conditions. The coordination between human crews and Lyrians became a delicate balance, a continuous cycle of observation, reaction, and recalibration. The success of each action depended on trust, communication, and relentless focus. One of the most compelling aspects of this phase was the emotional intensity. Humans felt the weight of responsibility for lives far beyond their own species. Lyrians, witnessing the human intervention, experienced a mix of relief, awe, and profound gratitude. The critical moment was not only a test of technology and skill, but also a test of courage, empathy, and moral resolve. Both civilizations were challenged to rise above fear, doubt, and exhaustion. They had to act decisively in the face of overwhelming odds, demonstrating resilience and determination that would define the story's turning point. The success of the initial interventions did not mean the crisis was over. The storms were still active, unpredictable, and dangerous. Humans had to maintain vigilance, continuously adapting strategies as conditions shifted. Lyrians contributed by stabilizing key areas, guiding rescue operations, and assisting in repairs to critical infrastructure. The critical moment evolved into a tense period of continuous action, where every hour, every decision, and every maneuver could make the difference between survival and destruction. The narrative tension remained high, keeping both humans and Lyrians on edge while emphasizing the enormity of the challenge they faced. By the end of this phase, the story had reached a dramatic peak. Humans had intervened directly, deploying advanced technology and performing extraordinary maneuvers to stabilize the planet and protect the Lyrian cities. The cooperation between the two civilizations had transformed what seemed like an impossible situation into a coordinated, dynamic effort against natural forces. The narrative highlighted the courage, skill, and ingenuity required to confront a crisis of this magnitude, as well as the importance of trust, collaboration, and moral responsibility in overcoming challenges that no single civilization could face alone. This escalation phase sets the stage for the resolution that follows. Readers or listeners are left with an intense sense of suspense, awareness of the immense stakes, and admiration for the bravery and ingenuity of both humans and Lyrians. The critical moment illustrates not only the physical dangers posed by natural disasters, but also the emotional and ethical complexities of responding to them. It demonstrates how courage, skill, and collaboration can tip the balance in situations that seem insurmountable. The stage is now fully set for the story's resolution. where the coordinated efforts of humans and Lyrians will determine the survival and future of an entire civilization. The resolution of the crisis began with careful, yet bold action. After days of observing, calculating, and testing strategies, the human fleet had a clear plan to stabilize the Lyrians' planet and save its population. They understood that time was running out, the storms were still active, unpredictable, and capable of destroying entire cities in an instant. That humans had prepared their technology, trained their crews, and coordinated with Lyrians on the surface, and now everything depended on flawless execution. This phase marked the turning point where determination, ingenuity, and courage would combine to turn the tide of disaster into hope. The first step in the operation involved deploying energy shields across the most vulnerable regions. These shields were not simple barriers. They were highly advanced devices capable of absorbing immense amounts of energy from storms, redirecting destructive forces, and stabilizing atmospheric patterns. Each shield had to be placed in precise locations, often over large cities or critical infrastructure points. Human pilots navigated through violent winds and energy surges to position the shields accurately. Some shields were launched from orbit, descending through storm clouds while being buffeted by turbulence, lightning, and debris. Every deployment carried the risk of equipment failure, and human crews had to react instantly to any malfunction. As the shields went into place, human engineers monitored their performance in real time. Sensors measured wind speeds, energy surges, and the stability of the Lyrians' buildings below. Engineers adjusted power outputs, recalibrated shields to compensate for shifting storm patterns, and coordinated closely with Lyrians who had experience in understanding the planet's natural energy flows. The collaboration between species was remarkable. Humans brought technological expertise and emergency response experience, while Lyrians provided detailed knowledge of their environment, warning humans about subtle shifts that could impact the shield's effectiveness. This partnership became the heart of the resolution, combining strengths to achieve what neither civilization could accomplish alone. While the energy shields absorbed the worst of the storm's power, other teams focused on atmospheric stabilization. Powerful devices called atmospheric stabilizers were deployed to counteract violent wind currents and redirect dangerous energy flows away from populated areas. These devices required constant adjustment. If misaligned, they could amplify the storm's energy rather than reduce it. Human scientists worked alongside Lyrians to calculate the precise positions, angles, and energy levels necessary to stabilize the skies. The process was delicate and exhausting. Every adjustment had to consider hundreds of variables, from wind direction and speed to energy surges and gravitational anomalies. Failure was not an option. Meanwhile, evacuation and rescue operations continued in parallel. Lyrians guided populations toward temporary shelters and secure zones while human crews transported vulnerable individuals using specialized shuttles designed to withstand extreme turbulence. Families were reunited, children were protected, and elders were assisted with care. These operations took place under incredibly challenging conditions. Debris, flooding, and erratic weather threatened every movement. Yet the human-Lyrian collaboration allowed thousands to be saved. Every successful evacuation reinforced confidence, proving that the combined efforts were beginning to work. The turning point in this resolution came when a massive storm, one of the most destructive observed during the entire crisis, approached a major city. This storm had been swirling at high energy levels for hours, growing larger and more violent with every passing minute. Without intervention, the city would have been completely destroyed, with loss of life numbering in the tens of thousands. Human commanders devised a risky but necessary maneuver. They would position a network of energy shields in a precise formation to create a protective barrier, while atmospheric stabilizers redirected the storm's energy. The maneuver required extraordinary timing, coordination, and skill. Pilots flew through the heart of the storm. Engineers adjusted energy flows, and Lyrians on the ground assisted by reinforcing critical structures and guiding evacuations. The tension was palpable. Every second counted, and any mistake could result in total disaster. Despite the extreme danger, the operation succeeded. The shields absorbed most of the storm's destructive power, while stabilizers reduced wind speeds and redirected energy away from the city. Buildings that would have collapsed with even minor shaking now stood firm, and floodwaters were guided safely into uninhabited areas. The Lyrians watched in awe as their homes, schools, and community centers survived an event that would have been catastrophic without human intervention. This success demonstrated the combined power of courage, technology, and collaboration, showing that even the most chaotic and destructive forces could be managed with precise action and cooperation. As the crisis continued, similar operations were carried out across other cities and regions of the planet. Humans and Lyrians worked tirelessly, coordinating multiple interventions simultaneously. Each storm presented unique challenges, and no single plan worked for all scenarios. The human fleet's adaptability and the Lyrians' intimate knowledge of their planet created a dynamic response system that could adjust to any situation. Storms were dissipated, floodwaters redirected, and energy surges neutralized in a series of carefully orchestrated maneuvers. Over time, the planet's environment began to stabilize. The worst of the storms lost intensity, winds calmed, and the seas returned to manageable levels. The resolution was not instantaneous. It required sustained effort, constant monitoring, and repeated adjustments. Yet, step by step, the combined efforts of humans and Lyrians began to restore order. One of the most inspiring aspects of this phase was the way the two civilizations learned from each other. Humans gained insight into natural energy patterns and planetary ecology far beyond their previous understanding. Lyrians learned how technology could be applied quickly and decisively in life-threatening scenarios. Mutual respect and trust grew as each species recognized the value of the other's skills and knowledge. By the time the final storms had been managed, a bond had formed that went beyond simple cooperation. It was a partnership founded on shared experience, courage, and the desire to protect life. The resolution also highlighted human ingenuity and moral resolve. Crews had faced impossible odds, yet they continued to act with precision and determination. Engineers found solutions to technical failures in real time. Pilots executed dangerous maneuvers with skill, and commanders made decisions under extreme pressure. Humanity's commitment to action, even in the face of uncertainty and risk, became the defining factor in saving the Lyrian civilization. This was a moment of triumph, not just of technology but of courage, empathy, and moral responsibility. By the end of this phase, the planet was no longer in immediate danger. Storms had been contained or dissipated, cities were stabilized, and most of the population had been safely evacuated or protected. The Lyrians, who had spent days in fear and uncertainty, could finally breathe a collective sigh of relief. Families reunited, communities began to assess damages, and the first steps toward rebuilding started to take shape. The human fleet remained in orbit, ensuring that any residual instability could be managed. But the sense of crisis had passed. What had seemed impossible, the survival of a civilization under extraordinary natural threat, had been achieved through cooperation, technology, and relentless effort. This resolution phase also emphasized the emotional impact of the events. Lyrians experienced deep gratitude toward humans, not only for saving their lives but for demonstrating that they were willing to act selflessly and decisively in the face of danger. Humans, in turn, felt satisfaction and humility, recognizing that their success was the result of teamwork, courage, and learning from those they had come to help. The experience left a lasting impression on both civilizations, shaping their perception of what could be accomplished when knowledge, bravery, and collaboration were combined. Importantly, this phase showed that resolution does not mean the problem disappears immediately. Stabilization required constant attention, repeated adjustments, and continued monitoring. Human engineers remained vigilant, assisting Lyrians in strengthening their infrastructure, deploying long-term energy stabilization devices, and teaching them strategies to handle future environmental challenges. The process highlighted that true resolution often involves sustained effort, careful planning, and the willingness to continue learning and adapting even after the immediate danger has passed. The resolution also served as a symbolic turning point in the narrative. It marked the moment when despair transformed into hope, chaos gave way to order, and fear was replaced with confidence. The story illustrated that no matter how overwhelming a crisis may seem, courage, ingenuity, and cooperation can create a path to survival and recovery. For the Lyrians, it was a lesson in resilience and the value of alliances. For humans, it reinforced their principles of moral responsibility and the power of decisive action in the face of the unknown. By the conclusion of this phase, the reader or listener is left with a sense of triumph, relief, and anticipation for what comes next. The immediate danger has been overcome, the planet and its people have survived, and both civilizations have grown stronger through the experience. The resolution lays the foundation for reflection, rebuilding, and the establishment of deeper relationships between species, setting the stage for the final phase of the story. It demonstrates the transformative power of courage, technology, and collaboration, while also emphasizing the emotional and ethical dimensions of saving an entire civilization from near annihilation. After the storms had finally subsided and the planet's environment had been stabilized, the Lyrians and humans had a moment to pause and reflect on what had just occurred. The sheer magnitude of the crisis had left both civilizations shaken but profoundly changed. For the Lyrians, it was a realization of how fragile even the most carefully planned and advanced civilization could be when confronted with the raw, unpredictable power of nature. For humans, it was a reaffirmation of their capacity to act decisively, to innovate under pressure, and to extend compassion and courage beyond their own species. The aftermath of the crisis was a time of rebuilding, learning, and understanding, as both sides began to process not only the physical recovery of the planet, but the deeper emotional and cultural impact of the events they had endured together. Immediately following the stabilization efforts, attention turned to the practical needs of the Lyrians. Many cities had survived but where damaged buildings had been weakened, energy grids disrupted, and transportation systems partially destroyed. Humans worked alongside Lyrians to repair essential infrastructure, restore power, and clear debris from critical areas. Medical teams treated injuries, provided psychological support, and helped manage the trauma that had been caused by days of near-constant fear and danger. Even with technology capable of extraordinary feats, the work of healing a civilization was not just mechanical. It required patience, empathy, and careful planning. Humans had to ensure that their interventions were sustainable, giving the Lyrians the tools and knowledge to maintain stability after the fleet eventually departed. One of the most striking aspects of this phase was the relationship that had formed between the two species. In the heat of crisis, trust had been forged in situations where hesitation could have meant death. Humans had relied on the Lyrians' understanding of their planet, while Lyrians had trusted humans to act effectively in ways their civilization could not manage alone. This trust now translated into deeper communication and collaboration. Humans shared techniques for monitoring environmental changes, maintaining stabilization systems, and preparing for potential future cosmic events. Lyrians, in return, offered insights into planetary energy flows, ecological resilience, and cultural practices that had allowed them to thrive for centuries. This exchange of knowledge went beyond simple cooperation. It laid the foundation for long-term collaboration and mutual enrichment. The emotional aftermath was equally profound. For the Lyrians, gratitude toward the humans was overwhelming. They had survived a catastrophe that had the potential to wipe out entire cities, knowledge, and culture. Families reunited. Communities celebrated the resilience of their society, and ceremonies were held to honor both those who had endured the storms and those who had come to help. The Lyrians recognized that their survival was not only due to their own efforts but also because of the courage, technology, and ingenuity of humans who had risked their lives to intervene. These events left a lasting imprint on their collective consciousness, shaping how they viewed the wider galaxy and the possibility of interstellar cooperation in the future. Humans, too, were affected in ways that extended beyond pride in their success. They had witnessed the fragility of life on another world, experienced the intensity of near-catastrophic events in an alien environment, and developed bonds with beings whose culture and perspective were entirely different from their own. The mission reaffirmed the values that had guided humanity in its expansion across space: moral responsibility, courage, and the willingness to act when capable, even when there is no obligation to do so. Humans left the planet with a sense of accomplishment, but also with humility, understanding that even the most advanced technology and preparation could not guarantee success without collaboration, adaptability, and mutual trust. In the weeks following the crisis, humans and Lyrians worked together to ensure long-term stability. Advanced monitoring stations were established to detect energy fluctuations, atmospheric shifts, and other potential threats. Lyrians were trained in the use of stabilization technologies, ensuring that the knowledge would remain with them rather than relying entirely on human presence. Educational programs were developed to teach younger generations about both natural phenomena and technological solutions, fostering a new generation capable of managing challenges independently while also appreciating the importance of interstellar cooperation. This long-term preparation was a testament to the lesson that surviving a disaster is only part of the story. Sustaining civilization and ensuring resilience for the future is equally vital. The aftermath also included the rebuilding of social and cultural life. Communities that had been dispersed or traumatized began to come together again. Public spaces were restored, schools reopened, and cultural events resumed. Humans participated in these events, sharing stories of the rescue, celebrating the collaboration, and learning more about Lyrian's history, art, and philosophy. The shared experiences created a sense of unity, reinforcing the idea that even across species, empathy, courage, and action could create bonds that transcended distance, language, and biology. These cultural exchanges were just as important as the technical interventions, showing that survival and recovery are not only physical but also emotional and social processes. Reflection became a major theme in this phase. Leaders from both civilizations took time to assess the lessons learned. Lyrians reflected on the importance of being prepared for crises that exceeded their experience, and the value of reaching out beyond familiar borders for assistance. Humans reflected on the moral responsibility of those capable of intervention, the importance of acting decisively under uncertainty, and the value of combining diverse knowledge and perspectives when facing complex challenges. These reflections were shared publicly, reinforcing cultural memory and creating guidelines for future collaboration. The story of survival became a teaching moment, emphasizing that courage, preparation, and cooperation can prevent catastrophe even when the odds seem insurmountable. The humans' presence gradually transitioned from active intervention to advisory support. As Lyrians became more confident in managing the planet's stabilization systems, humans began to withdraw from constant operational roles, remaining nearby only to provide guidance when requested. This gradual handover demonstrated a key aspect of responsible assistance, helping others achieve independence rather than fostering dependence. Lyrians, empowered by their success and the knowledge gained from humans, began to see themselves not only as survivors but as capable stewards of their planet. prepared to face future challenges with confidence and resilience. In addition to technological and social lessons, the aftermath highlighted the emotional resilience of both species. The crisis had tested their ability to remain calm, focused, and cooperative under extreme stress. Humans had confronted the fear of failure, the possibility of losing lives on an unprecedented scale, and the ethical weight of their interventions. Lyrians had faced the terror of annihilation, the challenge of coordinating with a foreign species, and the necessity of trusting beings they barely knew. Emerging from these experiences, both civilizations gained not only practical knowledge but also a deeper understanding of courage, empathy, and the value of solidarity in the face of overwhelming adversity. By the end of this phase, the planet had returned to a state of relative calm. Communities were recovering, ecosystems were stabilizing, and the Lyrians had regained confidence in their ability to manage their world. Humans, having completed their mission, prepared to leave, but not without leaving lasting symbols of their involvement. Monitoring stations, stabilization technology, and shared knowledge. The departure was not one of distance or detachment but of trust, leaving behind both tools and confidence that the Lyrians could continue to thrive independently. The relationship between the species was now stronger than ever, founded on mutual respect, shared experience, and a recognition of the value each brought to the galaxy. Finally, this phase underscored the long-term philosophical impact of the crisis. Both humans and Lyrians were forced to confront questions of responsibility, morality, and the meaning of courage. Humans reflected on the importance of acting not only to protect their own interests but to safeguard life wherever possible. Lyrians reflected on the power of seeking help, trusting others, and embracing collaboration even with unknown entities. Both civilizations emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper appreciation for life, and a commitment to fostering cooperation across species. These reflections became part of the cultural memory, stories shared across generations, teaching that survival, growth, and wisdom often require courage, partnership, and ethical action beyond one's immediate sphere. In conclusion, the aftermath of the crisis was a period of recovery, learning, and reflection. The Lyrians regained control of their world and rebuilt their society with the support of humans, who provided technology, guidance, and moral encouragement. Both species grew stronger from the experience, forming bonds that would last for generations. The events became a powerful story of collaboration, courage, and resilience, showing that even in the face of overwhelming danger, life can endure when intelligence, empathy, and action come together. The planet, its people, and their future were secured not only by technology and planning but by the shared bravery and compassion of two civilizations, forever changed by the extraordinary events they had survived together.